Hello and welcome to this talk on offensive versus defensive AI. My name is Nabil Zoldjalali and I'm the Director of Cloud Security at Darktrace. Among rapidly evolving technological advancements, the emergence of AI-enhanced malware is making cyber attacks exponentially more dangerous and harder to identify. In the near future, we will actually begin to see supercharged AI-powered cyber attacks being leveraged at scale. To protect against these offensive AI attacks, we'll see organizations turn to defensive techniques, also leveraging cyber AI, which can identify and neutralize emerging malicious activity no matter where, when, or how it strikes. In this session, I actually wanted to focus on three key concepts. The first is the paradigm shift in the cyber landscape. The second is advancements in offensive AI attack techniques. And I want to show you guys a few really interesting examples of that. And the third is a promising solution that's really modeled after the human immune system to cyber defense, as well as autonomous response capabilities. And we'll end today's session with a few real-world examples of emerging threats that are showing incredible advancement in the field of offensive artificial intelligence. A little bit about myself and a background of Darktrace. Darktrace is actually the world-leading AI company for cyber defense. It was founded in 2013 in the wake of actually protecting the UK's critical national infrastructure during the 2012 Olympics. And as you can see, Darktrace has experienced tremendous growth. And we've really pioneered a number of really incredible technologies. Some that I want to mention are autonomous response, as well as cyber AI analysis. We have a team of over 30 PhD mathematicians that are based in our Cambridge R&D facilities with over 100 world-class SOC cyber threat analysts that sit around the globe. But that's enough about Darktrace. What I really want to focus on is, for starters, an incredible paradigm shift we're seeing in terms of the cyber landscape. Today's digital age is really one of hyperconnectivity. And this really brings up one really important point around the imminent advancements of 5G and what that will do in terms of enabling connections with an average download speed of 1 gigabit per second, 100 times faster than 4G. What this increase in speed, efficiency, and reliability means is that we'll be actually able to power a whole new surge in IoT, providing the infrastructure that's needed to transfer enormous amounts of data across any network. Now, with 5G in place, Gartner actually predicts that the number of internet-connected devices will grow from 14.2 billion to 25 billion in a short 2 years by the end of 2022. And because of 5G capabilities and download speeds, this new decade could actually see a cyber arms race where lightning-fast connection speeds actually facilitate the speed of machine-driven automated attacks that land in a victim's network long before they realize that anything's amiss. Now, what's really interesting is that you look at another key aspect of the cyber landscape, and that is the evolvement and just absolute blasting growth in terms of cloud, both hybrid and multi-cloud environments. Businesses are migrating to the cloud, and rightfully so, right? Cloud compute is actually more efficient, affordable, and scalable. And this has hugely significant impacts on how network perimeters are continually being redefined. Cloud computing has become an influential strategic driver of new business models. And part of this shift really to remote data centers is driven by businesses seeking efficiency gains and corporate innovation centers launching digital transformation projects. But what I find really interesting is that oftentimes a single security team is responsible for securing workloads across multiple applications and environments, from Azure, AWS, to even Dropbox and on-premise data centers. And the lack of visibility and control for security teams oftentimes leaves them completely blind to threat vectors in the cloud. Fast-moving, untraceable malware, insider threat, and compromised credentials. I think last year alone, there was a 28% rise in terms of cyber threats to cloud and SaaS applications. And this brings me to the third point, which is critical national infrastructure. I think there are steady changes to attacker motivations And industries that are targeted oftentimes can be cyclical and they can change from time to time. Traditionally speaking, hackers, they really focus on stealing data to monetize and to really, make a quick, easy buck. But today, we're actually seeing that shift somewhat. Cyber threats are becoming way more sinister in terms of consequences. Attacks now involve sabotaging, disrupting technology systems that support critical and public infrastructure. And we're also seeing hackers focus their attention on breaching industrial environments. Attacks against national infrastructures are posed to reshape the threat landscape across the globe. So what happens really when you bring these different aspects together? A combination of 5G IoT, cloud, and different attacker motivations. I think this will precipitate a paradigm shift for both the offensive and defensive use of AI, which really will create a new cyber landscape where more powerful threat vectors can be seen anywhere. Now, I really want to focus on the offensive AI piece for a moment. The most significant technological innovation is the near reality of AI enhanced malware. And this really has far superior attack mechanisms at every stage of the kill chain, including automated decision making, improved lateral movement, and more efficient and evasive data exfiltration. I think in 2020, we'll see artificially intelligent attacks or offensive AI hit businesses at a scale and speed that has never been seen before. A lot of businesses have actually struggled with early signs of this as they were trying to adjust to working remotely, right? Offensive AI malware, I think, will be able to infiltrate a target's network and leverage available contextual information to direct its attacks automatically, deciphering where the most valuable data lies. And I know a lot of times when we talk about offensive AI, a common sentiment that I could hear is people saying, well, Nabil, are you really sure it's that close? Is the AI really that good? In terms of, polymorphic malware or socially engineered attacks, what promise is there that we could look at tangibly today that would essentially put us in a position or state of mind where we go, oh, wow, maybe Nabil is right. Maybe there is something where we'll actually see full-blown AI-powered malware in the wild, entering an era of, fully fledged cyber warfare. And to that extent, I actually want to bring up a few key points. I think AI is way more advanced than many are actually aware of. If you need proof of this, you don't need to look any further than a commercially available AI secretary. You guys can all go to a website, x.ai, and this company is incredible. They've actually created an AI bot that will act as your secretary. You could CC Amy Ingram, initials AI, into any email you want. Amy will take care of full scheduling for you. They can cohesively understand responses. They'll read your calendar. They'll understand when to schedule. You can even train it to know what your preferences are in terms of location and time of day. And that's, just very easily understandable commodity AI. But what is the same motivation from an attacker's perspective? And to do this, I wanted to go over a very common example that should be familiar to everyone, which is spear phishing attacks. All businesses, large and small, are going to eventually need to be prepared for more impersonation attacks hitting employee inboxes. I know, given the kind of surge and change, a lot of very interesting email phishing campaigns around fear, uncertainty, and doubt, leveraging the contextual surroundings that we live in today. But to understand what motivates attackers to do this, I want to show you guys a very easy example of what it looks like when an attacker is lazy and they just want to kind of blast out a whole bunch of phishing emails to an entire business. You can see in this image that it seems like a really ill-informed, fairly obvious phishing attack, right? Although the sender and enterprise could sound legitimate to some, there's obviously a variety of different key flags. For example, spelling mistakes, writing incredible the wrong way, perhaps, right? And these types of mistakes are fairly obvious. A lot of times we see them in very beginner entry-level phishing campaigns. And for the most part, it's very easy to spot this, whether it's software or human eye. And the inconsistencies in style, grammar, landscape, it really doesn't it doesn't evoke a sense of certainty, and oftentimes attackers will have to pay the price because this won't get them very far. But what happens when attackers want to invest time and resources in really understanding their targets, understanding what's going on, and want to send a highly tailored, highly topical phishing email to try to attack someone? All of a sudden, this looks very different, right? Now that you can see, if an attacker really wants, they can actually do a fairly good job. Use a username that is highly topical. They can insert themselves in part of a conversation that makes absolute sense. And we've seen this. I've personally seen this, right? I've seen examples of attackers waiting outside offices, following employees during their, afternoon walks, and, just listening at an arm's length on what their conversations are, so that when they send a phishing link, it's highly topical. It makes sense. There's no indication that this is poorly timed or ill-equipped. And the only challenge that attackers face from that front is that it's resource intensive. These types of advanced spear phishing emails, they're incredibly expensive, right? Spending hours or days doing recon on a customer, listening to what they're doing, trying to figure out how to approach an email, how to phrase it, what to offer in terms of initial bait. It's not cheap. But with a new advancement in leveraging of AI, now attackers can actually supercharge this. And we're already seeing signs of this. I know MIT had published a report a few years ago of this open source tool called Snap_R, which is a piece of offensive AI that will go and read specific suspects' Twitter feeds, and then they'll send them a custom phishing tweet that's topical to them and that's addressing issues that they want to talk about. So when you look at this, right, really an entirely new approach that acknowledges the complexity of a digital environment, how do you counter this? How do you counter this type of sophisticated attack where attackers are leveraging as much data as they can get their hands on to bait people and to create success for themselves? And what we found at Darktrace is really the success lies in taking a business-wide approach to defend the entire digital estate, right? How do you defend against an attacker that's trying to leverage as much data as they can, albeit not that much, to create very subtle and very highly targeted attack attempts? Is by leveraging more data. So what we found is the only way defenders can have a leg up in this battle is to really leverage the data they have internally and to use that, to feed that into an enterprise, immune system model where you can learn what normal looks like, and to be able to then have that feed into a variety of different aspects. I know at Darktrace we have two flagship products that work together in real time. One to detect, which is the enterprise immune system, right? It's self-learning AI engine which builds an understanding of all the actions and behaviors of every individual and system in your organization. And the second AI engine is Antigena. It's a one-of-a-kind autonomous response software that's able to act as the decision-making engine using that knowledge of self that we've already built with the enterprise immune system to make recommendations and to take appropriate surgical action that essentially allows companies to contain threats as they happen. And overarching this is our cyber AI analyst capability to actually, really use a major advancement in innovation to actually help companies not only detect, not only respond, but to also augment the humans with actual investigations themselves. But I want to focus on a few key aspects of the approach. And the first is the immune system approach. If you look at this battle where you're fighting against an attacker who's using advanced techniques, you don't know what they're going to do next. Every attack looks a little bit different, and you can't holistically protect yourself by solely depending on historical attacks. What you find is a bit of a challenge, right? And a perfect parallel or analogy to this challenge is the actual human immune system, right? Our human immune systems aren't designed with a database of everything that could potentially go wrong. Instead, what they do is that they learn at a very accurate level every single part of the human, right? They understand the very fabric of your uniqueness in understanding your DNA, and your immune system then is able to actually understand what's part of you, what is part of self, and what doesn't belong. And not only that, it actually does something really interesting. Fundamentally speaking, when it understands what doesn't belong, it takes action. And this is really what Darktrace has been chasing after over the last few years, right? Creating an immune system technology for organizations that allows unsupervised machine learning and AI to learn the essence of a business, what is normal to them. Every business is set up differently. Every organization operates a little bit differently. But to be able to understand at a very fundamental layer what that means allows us not only to detect when things go awry or when things just don't fit in the normal pattern of normality of a business, right? Business as usual, but also brings up response. And if you could properly detect deviations from norm and really accurately contextualize when things are going awry, you're then actually able to respond. And to me, in some ways, this autonomous response approach is a true litmus test for how good your machine learning is. If you have machine learning that's riddled with false positives and it's creating all sorts of alerts that are meaningless, and it's not properly learning the fabric of the business, then you can't really respond in any tangible way to create any value. But in light of the imminent realities that offensive AI is bringing with it, and as the threat landscape evolves, what we've seen at Darktrace is that autonomous response capabilities are becoming fundamental in protecting sensitive databases, critical industries, fundamental employees, and a whole workforce that is pivotal to the business continuing to operate. Darktrace's autonomous response capabilities are actually world first, going beyond just automated playbooks or learning reactions, but actually taking surgical and precise response at the most appropriate time to really neutralize threats. And again, while traditional rules-based tools struggle really to spot these unknown threats, things that we haven't seen before, supercharged attacks, leveraging this very knowledge to use new domains, new techniques, new protocols, cyber AI and autonomous response are actually fundamentally changing the game in the benefit of defenders, right? They're able to detect these AI-powered attacks at the earliest stage, and not only that, thwarting it to actually allow businesses to catch up. Now, what's really interesting is I actually have talked a bit about a few examples that we've seen out there in the wild, but I want to really cover a few really interesting case studies that bring some of this to life. What I want to talk about first is some really interesting advanced ransomware that we've detected at a very interesting telecommunications firm. This event actually happened on a Friday. It was just after 7 p.m. And what we actually saw was an employee at this telco accessed their personal email address from their corporate smartphone and was tricked into downloading a suspicious file. What happened next, though, is really interesting. Within seconds, the device started to actually reach out to external servers on the Tor network, which is an anonymization network that's oftentimes used for a variety of nefarious types of behaviors. But in this case, we actually discovered that it was also actually using a new and advanced strain of ransomware where the attack was actually automated and it spread faster than what you would normally expect. Within 9 seconds, we actually saw a variety of files starting to get encrypted. And then immediately after that, we're actually starting to see the attack spread. And within seconds, right, 24 seconds was the total amount of time, was enough time to see enough of this spreading to actually revise our understanding of what normal looks like and to enforce a very strict lockdown so that devices don't continue to get encrypted. But this is what I want to focus on, really. While the security team, goes off for the weekend and you have defensive AI, cyber AI that's sitting there and able to surgically thwart the attack within seconds of it happening, the attack really shows nascent stages of automation that leverage really advanced attacker techniques, right? A lot of times, these types of digital environments, they're bespoke, and we usually see an increase in network complexity that forces attackers to spend a significant amount of time doing recon, finding vulnerabilities. But this attack, really within seconds, reoriented itself, found exactly what I wanted to target. And this is now the speed and scale which we're starting to see attacks operate at. But it doesn't really stop at speed and scale. One case I also wanted to highlight was one where we actually saw some really interesting autonomous lateral movement. With AI enhanced malware, I really think every stage of the attack kill chain is going to be improved. What we recently saw at an employee, which was a law firm, we actually saw one of the employees fall victim to a phishing campaign, and that led to an infection of this propagating malware called TrickBot. Now, TrickBot is fairly well known. It's an information stealing malware that also leverages a worming functionality, utilizing SMB, which exploits similar in kind of different ransomwares we've seen, such as WannaCry. But in this case, two of the infected devices actually also showed signs of a tool being used that was part of the Empire PowerShell post-infection framework. And this is actually a commonly used framework by advanced human attackers that facilitates, covert hands-on keyboard attacks. So what we're seeing here is really interesting. On one hand, you have this self-propagating TrickBot malware that's very famous. It self-propagates. It just spreads, the way a lot of other very popular malware ransomware does. But we're seeing that now combined with really advanced covert tactics using PowerShell post-infection framework, where that type of approach is usually used by attackers with hands-on keyboards, right? The attackers were diversifying essentially their payload to maximize potential profits, stealing banking details first, and then also locking users out until a ransom is paid. And what I think this really leads us to is a future where AI-driven malware will self-propagate via a series of autonomous decisions, intelligently tailored to the parameters of the infected system, right? Leveraging worm-style attacks with intuitive understandings of the target environment and choosing lateral movement techniques that are the most efficient and effective in that specific scenario. Autonomous malware will probably also learn context by unobtrusively observing normal business operations, right? Nothing is stopping them from performing intelligent recon and understanding device patterns of life, right? And the only way to get ahead of this is to have a better understanding, right? Having AI that's more sophisticated, that has been learning for a longer period of time, that is more accurate and precise in its understanding of normal, to be able to detect when these types of issues start to come up. And one other aspect of kind of advanced AI, and I think is something that we're gonna see a lot of, is I really think in the future we're gonna start to see weaponized AI be able to adapt and disguise itself within a target environment. One case study I actually wanted to bring up here was at a power and water company. We detected a device that was infected with malware, and actually the malware was using a number of steps to disguise its activity as legitimate. For starters, it actually used a self-signed SSL certificate for a Windows update, trying to blend in with Windows traffic. The subsequent requests were all communicating over very familiar ports, 443 and 80, that often, again, blend into very normal network traffic. It also even used alternative doppelganger techniques, which essentially is to use a domain we're all familiar with, for example, google.com, but instead of spelling Google with one L, they would spell Google with two L's, and they would purchase this unique doppelganged domain to benefit themselves. And then last but not least, I also really wanted to talk about a future in which AI, we talked about offensive AI techniques leveraging a number of different approaches, being able to blend in with normal network noise, spreading at machine speed. And then last but not least, I really want to kind of highlight the fact that I think in the future, AI enhanced malware will also be much stealthier. One example of this we recently actually saw was we detected a device that was trying to send 15 gigs of confidential data to an attacker's external infrastructure. And oftentimes, the first response is, oh, 15 gigs is obvious. There's a number of different controls we have in place that could catch that type of exfiltration. But what was interesting was that in this case, it was a human attacker that was conducting the exfiltration, and they were conducting it incredibly low and slow. In this specific example, what we actually saw was the attacker was actually exfiltrating data at the rate of less than 1 meg over the course of an hour. This is incredibly low. A lot of companies wouldn't bat an eyelash at that much data. Even though it's going to multiple rare locations or going to a website that's 100% rare, the data amount itself is incredibly low. And the fact that humans are really exhibiting incredible patience, right, trying to achieve their attack mission, really demonstrates how in the future AI enhanced malware will really create and allow an attacker with strong presence in a target's network to fly low and slow under the radar, be stealthier than ever before. Right? It's already difficult for traditional defenses to detect this type of low and slow attack, and I really think it'll become even harder once malware uses AI to understand digital context, understand the normal connection patterns, understand where the thresholds are where you already get notified and try to fly just below the radar. That brings me to the conclusion of this series. I really hope you enjoyed it. Just to re-emphasize, I really think we're heading into a cyber arms race where the more defenses we have that are leveraging cutting edge AI to understand what businesses normally look like, what the patterns of life of an entire entity or enterprise are, the better off we are as these attackers start making incredible advancements in terms of their techniques and the tools they use to achieve their missions. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take any questions you guys might have.